All right, thanks everybody for tuning in today. We got a great episode. I got a great guest on the show today. I totally just forgot your name.
It's Tyson.
Tyson. Shit, I meant to write that down. Thanks for joining us today, Tyson. Give you a fun fact about Tyson. Tyson has an irrational fear of getting bit by a fish in a pool. Am I right on that one?
Absolutely.
Awesome. I don't even know what to say to that. So, before we get started, you want to give a shout out to anybody in particular?
No, not really. I guess just anybody who's struggling, hopefully you find some hope, I guess.
Yeah, I agree 100% that. So learn to identify and not compare, and
Yeah.
and it's going to be great. So the way I start every episode off is, what's one thing you're grateful for today and why?
I have like a weird view of gratitude. For me it's like an action type of thing, but like I'm grateful for the ability to learn emotional regulation because that's something I always struggled with, and it's something that I've been working on the last year, so I'm grateful for that.
Awesome. That's a good one too. I think one of the greatest gifts I've received is be able to separate emotion from logic, right? Or
Yeah.
feelings from logic, and be able to take myself out of the equation so I can kind of see it in a different light, right? Or different perspectives.
Yeah.
Awesome. You want to pull the mic up just a little bit for me, just upwards, but you got to keep it in front of you. There we go. Tighten it up, maybe.
Oh, there we go. There's a fucking thing.
Yeah. Good.
We're
Good.
good.
Up a little higher.
Oh fuck.
I don't think that one will tighten it up anymore. We'll be good.
Whatever.
Sweet.
Fuck it. We'll just keep it there.
Fuck it. What else I gotta tell you? Nothing. I was gonna say we got absolutely no affiliation to 12 Step. Just to give you the heads up. No censorship. Say whatever you want. So
Okay.
I'm gonna edit that little bit out. So what was your childhood like? You want to kind of describe for us how?
My childhood was relatively good. When I was really young, my parents owned a store in small town Saskatchewan, and then my dad was a long distance truck driver, so he was gone the majority of the time. Um, I think when I was about 4, maybe 5ish, my dad started taking jobs in other provinces, so we did a lot of moving, and so it was basically me and my mom, and like I was a very like hyperactive, difficult child, so punishments were doled out quite frequently, and like in the 80s and 90s it was like physical punishment, right? So like that was something I dealt with. And then my parents divorced in, I think I was 9, so it must have been like 80, 89 or 90. And me and my mom ended up moving back to Saskatchewan from British Columbia, and then I was just a fucking terrible kid.
I'm the same. I was the same way.
Yeah, I would go to school. Like I attended my first school in Saskatoon, which was a Catholic school because it was the closest one to my house, and I'd never been to a Catholic school before. And previously, when I lived in British Columbia, like the school that I was at, I was very vindictive and very angry. So like they moved me from that school to like a quote unquote behavioral management school. And behavioral management meant when I got out of control, they would like physically throw me around and restrain me. So I learned quickly that if I got angry, and people got physical, I learned how to manipulate. So I would take my anger out in different ways. So I would like be very vindictive, or I would start rumors, or I would say something to someone to get someone else hurt. And I learned that from a very young age, right?
So to be more, what's the word? Not camouflaged, I guess, but kind of like, yeah, a
Well,
little
it's
bit.
more of like a manipulation tactic, right? To get what I want, like to see the results. Like I wanted to see that person hurt, and I knew if I did this, this, and this, like that would happen to that person. Like there's an instance, I was in grade 3, and he was a friend of mine, or supposed to be, and I was at his house visiting, and him and his older brothers beat me up. So I went to school the next day and I wrote a note, and it was like, fuck you, mom, you're a whore and a cunt and blah, blah, blah. And then I folded it up, put it in his backpack with the thing that said mom on it, because I knew his mom checked his bag every day. So she checked his bag, read the note. He caught a dirty ass whooping.
Yeah.
And then his mom brought it to the school, and the teacher was like, that's Tyson's writing.
You
So
got
I
busted.
so I
Yeah.
got called in, and then I got a whooping from my parents, but that was the type of stuff that I learned how to do, right? To get what the effect that I wanted. Like I learned that at a very young age.
Makes sense. And just from what I gather, were you an only child?
I am an only child, yeah.
So you got, and I'm the oldest, right? And one thing I learned, like in correlation between the oldest and then the only child, you're that's the learning curve for the parents, right? They have no idea,
Yeah.
like that's where they, yeah, discipline. That's their learning curve. I don't know how else
Yeah.
to put it.
Well, I had undiagnosed like mental health issues, right? Until I was like 10 years old. I was diagnosed with ADHD and like borderline personality disorder, but they couldn't make a solid call on that one because I was so young and my brain wasn't developed yet. So they were just like, well, he's ADHD. That's why he's like this. But a lot of it was is that I moved so much and I constantly had to make new friends, and it was always like a huge adjustment for me, right? I
Mhm.
would get associated and become friends and build these relationships, and all of a sudden they were gone. So I didn't know how to do it. So I just acted out, right?
Yeah,
Anger and violence, and like that seemed to like make people afraid of me or respect me, I guess.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. How old were you when you first started or got introduced? And yeah, how old were you when you got introduced to drinking or drugs?
Well, I'm from small town Saskatchewan, and it's customary at weddings or family events for kids to have sips of alcohol, right? So there was many a times where it's a Christmas, I'm at my auntie's or my uncle's, and my parents are like, "Here's a sip," and you have a sip, and then when the adults are all not paying attention, you and your cousins are fucking stealing booze off the table.
Yeah,
So like that's like the first time I really started trying alcohol. It wasn't for any specific reason, but there was always the fantasies of growing up and being an adult and being able to take part in the drinking and the cards and the conversations till whatever time in the morning. But the first time I really started using drugs to escape, I was about 13 years old.
yeah. What was your introduction? Right.
It was weed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever find, like? Do you remember your first experience or what it did for you?
Sort of. So like I was again in this behavioral school because I couldn't be in regular school, and I was prescribed Ritalin, and there was a bunch of kids from the hood who knew that Ritalin was worth money, and one of my little buddies was like, "Hey, like one of those is worth $20," and I was like, "Well, what can I get for $20?" And he's like, "Well, my mom's boyfriend sells weed," and he's like, "You can get 6 joints for $20." So we went to his house, and I took some of my Ritalin, and like I gave some to his sister who was 16 and she could buy it for us. Brought back the joints, and we just sat in his room fucking getting high. And like I don't really remember the feeling. Like it felt really weird at first, but I do remember the first time I smoked a joint to myself. I was at home. It was before school, and I put on Dr. Dre the Chronic because I figured like if I'm gonna smoke weed, I'm gonna listen to the Chronic album. And I smoked an entire joint to myself, and I went to get on the bus, and I greened out.
Oh
I
wow.
hopped on the bus, and I got sick, and I got off like a half a block later and threw up and just went home and went to bed. You know,
It didn't scare you away, eh?
no, I was like, I'm not going to give up on this. Like, I like the initial feeling and how it, like, I didn't understand that it was an escape at the time, but it was like an escape from who I was,
Yeah,
right?
100%. I totally get it. I think I was 14, 13, 13, 14, 13 when I took my first joint, right? So,
Hmm.
and I remember too, just being buzzed off that. What was the progression like for you, or how did things kind of escalate? Actually, let me start with this one real quick. How old are you?
I'm 38.
Okay, I'm 40, same generation. When you were talking about
Yeah.
getting beat, I was like, yeah, I can relate with that one. Like
Yeah.
tough love, I used to call it, or character building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's what our parents knew, right?
Mhm.
Like, my parents grew up like with extremely like strict parents, and like physical stuff was what you got when you acted up, so that's all they knew, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't fault my old man for it. I like
no.
for one second that's what he knew, and that it's just
Yeah.
generation, right? Like we're just wiser today, or have different concepts of punishment today, right? So, and we get in trouble for it if we do.
Yeah. Well, I blamed like my mom like for many years during my using for like the way she treated me when I was young. But like when I got clean and I started to realize that like who I really was and what I was really doing, like how difficult it must have been for her to like try to manage a child like me. Like I was not an easy person to get along with, man.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
I get that one. I was in and out of kitty jail and getting into
Oh
trouble
yeah.
and stealing stuff and fighting and friggin' yeah, all the dumb shit you do as a kid or a troubled teenager, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. What was the progression like then there?
Well, it went from weed to alcohol because that's like the natural progression for like for most kids, I think, and that's how it was for me. Like I just smoked weed until I was like probably about like 14 or 15, and then I was court ordered to go to this place called Ranchero in Regina. I was basically banned from the city of Saskatoon because my criminal activity from the time I was 13 till I was 15 made me a danger to the public. So when I got there, um, that's where I learned how to use like other drugs. So I was in this group home setting and like we're in high school and now kids are drinking all the time. And I found the best way for me to fit in with these people was to do drugs, right? Because it was hard for me to fit in with anyone else. I didn't do fucking sports. I wasn't a smart kid like by any means. I didn't like any of that shit. So like I found kids who got high and I got high with them and they're like, "Well, hey, you want to come drinking?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I do." And my idea of drinking was if I'm going somewhere, I'm going to buy an 18 and a 40 pounder because that's, that might be enough for me for the night, not thinking that 12 beers probably going to be more than a fucking enough, right? So that's how I go. And I figured that I'd have to drink all of it and I would try my best. And then, people would bring out whatever else and I'd just continue to do it. And then I finished their program where I got too old and I was like 17 turning 18 and I moved back to Saskatoon and went back to high school and like that's just fucking where it went off.
Yeah.
Ran into some old buddies of mine that I'd known since I was in elementary school, and then it was like fucking coke and ecstasy and like whatever. Like at one point I was the guy that everyone talked to because I had friends who had this and had that, so I just fucking had everything
Yeah.
and then it's like, "Well, hey, we're having a party, you should come." And it's like, "Okay, like you're gonna let me fit in because I got drugs? Well, I'm gonna continue to have more drugs."
Yep.
And then I want to say I was like 19, maybe 18, 19. I was introduced to like morphine and injecting morphine because two of my buddies did it. And that was the only thing that I hadn't done yet. Like I had fucking smoked crack and all that other shit. But I wanted to try that. And I remember me and my buddy we're planning on hitchhiking actually out here to Calgary to go pick up a whole bunch of dope from my buddy's brother. So like we bought some morphine and they fixed me up and I did a shot. I stood up when it hit me and I fucking fainted and I smashed my head on a windowsill. And when I woke up, my buddies thought I was dead. And then that was it. I was hooked. Went outside, I started throwing up and I was high for 17 fucking hours. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
like, if I can spend $30 and be high for fucking 17 hours, I was like, I never want to do anything else. And that was it.
Yeah.
That's by the time I was 25, I was a full blown junkie.
Yeah.
In and out of jail since I was 13. Like it didn't matter. Like if I was dope sick, I was doing whatever I had to do to get it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
At what point, did you ever think you might have a problem and did you try quitting on your own?
Before I started shooting dope, like I didn't think that drugs were a problem because I was like, everyone's fucking doing it. Like
Mhm.
everyone's doing coke, everyone's fucking smoking weed, everyone's drinking. Like it's what we do, man. We're young, we're having fun, like it's not a problem. But once I started shooting dope, like I think I was 20 between 25 and 27. Like I told my mom one day, like I went over to her house and I had like a fucking sawed off rifle that I had purchased like a few weeks before and I had it wrapped up because I had it prepped for whatever I needed and I took it over to her house and I was like, I need you to find someone to get rid of this for me. I have a drug problem and I need to stop. And so she had no idea, and so she's freaked the fuck out, and she's like, I don't know what to do with that. And I was like, well, I don't know. I was like, I can go bury it somewhere, but then I'll know where it is for when I need it. And she's like, no, 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 I'll find someone. And so I talked to my doctor, and they got me on drug replacement therapy, so the methadone program, and I did relatively well on the methadone program. Like I got down to about like 10 mils a day from like 100. It took me like a year and a bit, but I was still, like smoking weed and like doing blow once in a while because I didn't think that was the issue, right? Because
Yeah.
fucking shooting dope was the thing, and
Yep.
then I went to jail for like possession for the intent, and then I just increased my methadone. They cut me off, and then I just started shooting dope again.
Yeah. That was in jail, or
Yeah,
yeah. How old were you when you had to go do that bit?
that one I was yeah, I think I was 26 or 27 when that came down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us maybe to the end of your using and paint a picture for us of what your life looked like, probably at your lowest point?
Oh, fuck. My lowest point, the last like 4 or 5 years of my using, so about 20, yeah, between 25 and 26 till I was 30. It was like a steep progression to like living on the fucking streets. So my mom was going to these support groups for parents of kids who are addicts, and they finally convinced her to fucking cut me off, which is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. At the time, I didn't think so. So she told me, she's like, you are no longer welcome in this house. Like, I will not give you money. I will not cook you supper. Like, nothing. Like
Cut.
don't call me unless you want to get clean. And I was like, okay. So I spent like a number of years like living on the streets of Saskatoon. There was times where I was eating out of garbage cans and like bouncing around from fucking crack house to crack house and like selling dope when I had enough money that I could scrounge up to buy enough to sell it to other fucking junkies.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was low, and it lasted like it felt like an eternity, like doing that shit. And then I came out here to Alberta. A buddy of mine, he was a gang member out there, wanted to come out here to see his kid and his baby's mama. So I stole a van and we packed up all of his shit in the middle of the night and like drove out here in this van. We were here for like 2 or 3 days, and I think I'd been up on a flail for like 15 days. And me and his kid's mom were out fucking dumpster diving, and the fucking EPS pulled up behind me. And because I'm so fucking high, I forgot to like swap the plate out before I left Saskatchewan with a non-stolen plate.
Yeah.
Because I'd done many carjackings before. I'm an accomplished fucking car thief, man. But I'm all flailed out and I forget to swap the plate. So they run the plate, and they're like, I see them. They take the quick corner around the fucking next block, and I'm like, fuck, I know what's gonna happen. Sure
Yeah.
enough, I turn the corner, cherries light up, they pull me over, they pull me out, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Nothing." How come the ignition looks like this? I was like, "I don't know."
I found it that way.
Yeah, and then they start looking through the vehicle, and there's fucking drugs in there. There's fucking stolen property in there. They take me downtown. They throw me in the cells, and like 5 or 6 hours later, they come in with like a bottle, like a water bottle. They're like, "What's this?" And I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "I don't drink." Because I thought they meant vodka. And I guess out here in Alberta, GHB is a thing. Like, that's not something from Saskatchewan that we really do.
Yeah.
But apparently, one of the girls that I had in my vehicle had picked up a bottle of G and she forgot it in the van. So they were like, well, this is enough for intent to distribute. So that's a new charge. And I was like, oh, well, that's fucking wonderful.
Yeah.
you
Isn't it?
know?
Yeah.
So I'm in the remand and I'm talking to guys because I don't know about G, and I'm like, what's the time ratio for about a 600 mil pop bottle? And they're like, they don't look too kindly on it. They're probably like, that's about 3 years. And I was like, oh well, sweet. Like, I'm gonna do some federal time. That's awesome. So fast forward a bit. It's been about 2 weeks. I've detoxed. I've detoxed off of opiates like numerous times in jail. So I have a routine of like sleeping and eating and like masturbating when my roommate's not in the fucking room to like calm my nerves. So I'm thinking to myself, as like, if I get out of jail, what's gonna happen? I was like, I'm probably just gonna start doing drugs again, and then I'm gonna end up back here. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I make this plan to fucking kill myself, and I plan it all out. I'm like, I'm gonna take my sheet, I'm gonna secretly tie it off to the railing on the third floor, and I'm gonna fucking jump from around the stairs and fucking hang myself. And I was like, then it's gonna be over. I don't have to deal with this anymore because I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to fucking do drugs. I don't want to go to jail. I'm fucking tired of this, man. I've been doing it for like fucking almost 17 years. Like, I'm sick of this shit. So I get on the phone because I'm calling people because that's all you can do in there. So like I'm talking to my mom, we're just chatting, and I was like, I'm fucking sick of my life, man. Like, I don't want to fucking do this anymore. And she's like, well, do you want to go to treatment? And I was like, I guess so. I was like, I've never done that before, so you know what? Fuck it. Like, I'll give it a shot. So I get some information from the guards. They get someone from the John Howard Society there to come and bring me like a package. Like, they brought me a manila envelope like full of fucking AHS bullshit, and there was a bunch of treatment centers on there, and I had criteria, of course, of what the treatment center had to be. Like, it had to be co-ed because there had to be
Yep.
women there because I can't go to an all-male one, and like it had to be longer than 30 days because like I'd been using for almost 20 years. So I figured that if I went to one that was 9 days, that wouldn't be long enough. So I found like four of them, and I called my mom, and I was like, these are the names and numbers. I was like, I can't call them from the jail because I tried. So she called a bunch of places, and then I called her the next day, and she's like, yeah, I found one. And I was like, do they have room? And she's like, as long as we pay, you have a spot. And I was like, okay. I was like, how are we going to afford it? And she's like, I'm going to talk to your dad. I'm going to talk to the aunties and uncles, and we're going to see what we can do. And I was like, all right. I called her back 2 days later, and she's like, yep, you're in. We've made the payment. You have a spot. So I told my lawyer, because he said, he's like, if you can get a treatment spot, we might be able to get you out. And I was like, well, I doubt it. I was like, that's never happened before. I was like, that doesn't happen. You don't go to treatment if you have charges. So I told my lawyer, we went to fucking court, and I don't know, he talked to the crown and the judge, and they were like, yeah, he's got a spot. We're going to release him to this treatment center. And I fucking said, I was like, get the fuck out of here. And they all looked at me like, what? Because like back home, like that's not something that happens.
Yeah.
Like, if you get charged, they're like, well, you got a drug problem? Well, go to jail.
Yeah.
And
Go
then
sober up.
yeah, and then when you get out of jail, then you can go to treatment. But here, like, I guess that's a thing here in Alberta. So this treatment center, like the owner drove down from like around the Lacombe area to pick me up at 11 o'clock at night when the jail finally released me, to drive me to the fucking treatment center.
Oh wow.
And I was like, holy shit. I was like, either this guy cares about addicts or he really wants the money. It's probably both, but either way, he came and grabbed me, and like I said to myself, I was like, because I'm getting this opportunity, I was like, that's it. I was like, I'm fucking, it's both feet in,
Yeah.
like, no turning back. So yeah, I started this treatment program, and like, I did the fucking AA Hazelden 12-step deal that they got in treatment centers, and group therapy, and like all that fucking shit. And it was good. Like, I was there for 90 days. Like, I did my initial treatment for 1 month, and then I did cognitive behavior therapy for a second month, and then the third month I stayed as a volunteer, running like another program. It's called the How It Works program. It was started by these guys in Winnipeg, and one of the founders like has it at the treatment center and asked me if I would do this program. So I did it for about a month, and then I was like, okay, well, it's time for me to move on. And I had a choice, and the choice was either to move back home to Saskatoon or to stay in Alberta. And I was like, well, I don't want to go home, because if I go home, I feel like I'm gonna just go back to doing drugs, because I like that's what's gonna feel comfortable. So I knew two guys who lived in the Edmonton area that I was in treatment with, so I contacted one of them who had already moved back, and I was like, hey, if I move to Edmonton, can I stay at your place for a while? And he's like, yep. So I told him I want to move to Edmonton. I told my lawyer I'm gonna move to Edmonton, and then I fucking moved here.
Is that your clean date today?
My clean date is August 8th, 2014. I
So you're coming up on like 8 years.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Yeah, I chose the 8th of August because that's the day that I went to treatment. I had already been clean for a few weeks prior, but I felt it was more appropriate to choose the day that I chose to go to treatment for
Yeah,
my clean date.
makes sense. That's when your recovery started, right?
Yeah,
So I totally understand that. 8 years, good job.
thanks.
That first year, or so, what'd you do when you first got out? Then, when you first moved to Edmonton here, um, what was some of the biggest challenges that you faced after getting out of a 90-day treatment?
Um, Getting around because Saskatoon's a really small city. Like in comparison to Edmonton, like Edmonton's got almost a million people. Like it's massive. So like I didn't know how to commute properly, right? Because I'm used to a bus taking like 15 minutes to get somewhere, not like 45 minutes. So like I move in with this guy and like I had chose like a certain fellowship that I wanted to go to because while I was in treatment, like the people who came on the panel, like what they said really spoke to me, and I was like, that's what I identify as. Is I identify as an addict, so like that's the one I want to go to. But at first, I couldn't find them because I didn't know where to find them. So I was going to like another fellowship, and I'm in there like sharing like an addict, like very like abruptly and aggressively, and like some members like after the meeting were like, "Hey, have you heard of this one?" I was like, "That's the one I'm looking for." And they're like, "Call this number. You should be able to find some of the meetings." So I called this number and I found them, and like, yeah, then I just started going. And then after that, another buddy of mine that I was in treatment with messaged me and he's like, "Hey man, you want to come to this meeting out in Sherwood Park?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I do. Like I've been fucking looking for these meetings for like the last few weeks. Like, where have you been, man?" So he picked me up and we went out there and like I made that one my home group.
Nice.
And because I was so used to using drugs and alcohol to like, make connections with people, I figured that if I go to meetings and just announce myself as new, even though I'd been clean for 90 days, that it would make it easier for people to know that I'm new. So I would just be like, my name's Tyson, I'm an addict, and like I'm new to Edmonton and I don't know anybody. So if you want to hang out, please give me your fucking phone number. Because I was desperate for something different.
Yep.
And so like that's like I use that to get out of my comfort zone and like to try and break that pattern of like using to feel comfortable and using to fit in. So like my first year, like that's all I did, man. Like I eventually got a job, and so it was work, home, eat, meeting, home, eat, work all week.
Yeah.
That's all I did.
At least you had structure, right? Like that's for me as an addict, I need structure. Like, and I can wave off it a little bit, but like most days, like I need to be kind of pre-planned or know what I'm getting into and
Yeah.
like maintain that same routine in order to keep my sanity, right? Like it just, I don't do well with like people that work different shifts and all that stuff or randomly or on call. Like I couldn't do that. I couldn't, right?
Yeah.
Um, when you first got out there, what's something you suggest to other people then just getting out of a 90-day treatment or long-term treatment? Like what were some of the first steps you had you would suggest?
I want to say connection. Like don't be afraid to say that you're new, right? Like just because you may have like 30, 60, 90, or whatever days, like you're just getting out of a bubble, right? So
Yeah.
when you if you decide to go to meetings, like just announce yourself as new, like, "Hey, I'm new to these meetings. I just kind of want to meet some people," and hopefully people at that meeting will approach you and start talking to you. And don't be afraid to attend like fellowship events, like if
Mhm.
they go out for dinner afterwards or coffee or whatever the fuck it is, like just go.
Yeah.
Even if you don't talk to anyone and you just sit there and chime in once in a while, like eventually you'll just be comfortable and you'll be able to talk to them.
Yeah. I used to go around when I first got out of my treatment. I would go around, shake everybody's hand in that meeting when I showed up there. You know, I would introduce myself to every single person in that meeting, and then they get to know you or they welcome me, right? And somebody took me under their wing and started teaching me how to have fun in recovery and things like that. You know, that first year, what were some goals that you had set that you accomplished?
I didn't really have any goals that I could really think of because like like I had no aspirations. Like I assumed that I was gonna die using. So like when I got clean, like I think the only thing I wanted was to be able to be relatively stable and normal. And in my mind, normal was having a job and a vehicle and like money that I didn't spend on drugs, which is what I eventually got after like some time. About 6, 7 months into my first year, I had like a job and my own apartment and like a vehicle, and I was able to pay bills and stuff. And I don't know if it was something that I set for myself, but when I realized I was doing it, I was like, holy fuck, man. I was like, this is what it's like. Like, I have to budget money like to make sure I can pay these things.
Yeah.
That was a culture shock for me, like in the beginning.
That was one thing I was just sharing with a guest the other day was one of my biggest hurdles that I had to overcome was living on a fixed income. Like you can't just go make a couple grand in a handshake, you know. Like I have $2,000 a month and I got to make it fucking last, and I have to figure it out, right? Like it's
Yeah.
that was one of the hardest things that I had to overcome was that fixed income where I only get that. There's no quick cash, right?
Yeah.
How'd you deal with triggers at first?
When I was in treatment, there was this gentleman named Gordon. He'd been in recovery for, at that time, like 42 years. He had been sober, I guess is what he called himself. And he told me that triggers are just resentments waiting to pounce. And I was like, oh, he's like, so anything can be a trigger. He's like, your shoes untied walking down the street, you could just allow that to be a trigger to make you want to go use. So I took that to heart. So when things would like get under my skin or make me think about using, I'd be like, oh, like this is just a resentment coming from somewhere trying to get me to use. And I was like, I'm not going to allow it to fucking happen. Like that's kind of what I did in the beginning, and like I've never really heard anyone else like doing it that way.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one either, right? Like or that like perspective of it, right? Yeah, that makes sense. I'll tell you a funny story. Sea salt used to trigger me. Meth was my drug of choice, and
Yeah,
when I'd seen it, because I never seen it for the longest time, or I never saw it in active addiction. But after, I was like, that always looks like meth, and it took me a couple years, to like come to terms with, like, put that thought away. Um, Here's a question for you: change your thinking to change your behaviors, or change your behaviors to change your thinking? I don't know
for
if that
me,
was a little.
it's changing my perspective to change my behaviors. Because if like my mind erases a lot, and like I overthink scenarios like millions of times a day. Like I fire off and I overthink things, and if I allow my thoughts to like dictate my actions, then I get in trouble. Like I spoke about emotional regulation, like that's part of it for me, right? Because a lot of times my emotions and my thoughts dictated my actions.
Mhm.
So for me, it's definitely thoughts over actions.
Nice. How'd you get to that point, or what'd you have to do to like start regulating those feelings or be okay with them?
Suffering,
Just
suffering, yeah.
just
I
sitting through it. I feel your fucking feelings.
Well, the way it was is I think I was about 3 years clean. I was with my kid's mom. We'd been dating for about a year, and like I thought I was good, right? Like most people, which is funny because most people around that time they get this idea like, well, I've been clean this long or I've been sober this long and I can, I don't need meetings and I don't need step work. I'm fucking good. Or they get mad or resentful towards the fellowship that they're in, so they just stop going, and that's what I did. And I lived with my sponsor at the time; he was my roommate, so I stopped like being a part of like the fellowship, and I stayed away for almost 10 months. And at about 7, 8 months of being away, I started to get very depressed, and I couldn't pull myself out. And then my actions, I started being very mean and like vindictive towards like my girlfriend. And it was just like unwarranted stuff, right? And I became extremely toxic and vile. And it came to a head one Halloween. We were supposed to go to like a fellowship Halloween event, and yeah, like she said something, or I put on my costume and it didn't fit right, or I didn't think it fit right, and it's my whole mood just changed, and I just dropped into like this crazy depression, and I just went in my own head, and then I was like, holy fuck, I need to do something about this. And so I called AHS to get a therapist because I needed to talk to someone, because I was like, well, obviously drugs weren't the only problem because I assumed it was the drugs. That's why I was depressed and angry all the time. But at 3 years, I was like, well, I've been off it long enough that it shouldn't be affecting me this much. So yeah, I decided that after a lot of suffering that it was probably time to get some outside help to figure that out.
Yeah, makes sense. And that obviously helped. And then you recommend that too, obviously, I'm guessing. Like,
I don't recommend it to everyone, like if because it's a personal choice, right? But from what I've seen in my experience, that people who couple their recovery with like mental health help from a professional, whether it be private or AHS, whatever it is, like it usually works out pretty well. Like in my case, it's worked out extremely well. Like at almost 8 years clean, like I still see like a therapist once a month through AHS to, because I can't afford a fucking private one. My
oh,
health
they're
coverage
expensive.
doesn't cover it. So like I see her once a month, and like I work on specific stuff. Like now that I've been clean for this long, I have a lot of awareness of my behaviors and my defects and like the way that I act.
Mhm.
But I struggle with like identifying my emotions when they come up, right? Because I only know like anger and sadness and rage and like that's it. The other smaller ones that are compartmentalized and those broader ones I need to learn, like, or I want to learn how to identify those so I can be like, oh, like this is frustrating me, and then I can work on what's frustrating me to maybe bypass the anger and move into something else.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. And like I've mentioned this one tons is you know that feeling face chart where it's got all the different emotions. That sat on my fridge for a year. And every time I was feeling something, I would have to go over and like kind of check it to identify what it was because I had no fucking idea
Yeah.
what feelings were. You know, I had and it wasn't a one-time thing. All of a sudden I feel this and I'd recognize it. Like over time, you have to constantly feel those different feelings in order to be in tune with them, right?
hmm
So I totally get that one. Do you ever journal or pen to paper?
The only time I write stuff down is when I do step work. I'm not a journaler. I'm not really like a prayer. My sponsor always gives me shit. He's like, you need to fucking pray more. And I'm like, that's not like technically my belief system, but I'll give it a shot. So I try it once in a while, but mostly step work.
Yeah. I do sometimes, not daily, right? But when I get really fucked up in the head and really like squirrely, and that's when I have to. And it doesn't even make sense. Like I just put pen to paper. I can't even read it after when it's done. It's just kind of like puking up on that paper all the shit in my head, right? And
hmm
it brings some sanity. Sometimes I usually have to do it a couple days if like, I hit those lows that I need to like I don't know, function and I can't find the right words. It's just scribbles. And then in the garbage it goes when I'm done. And I never save them. I don't have to read them. I don't have to keep them for memorabilia. It was just a kind of a therapeutic value for me to like, I don't know, see those feelings or maybe realize it's to process that emotion, right?
Yeah, it's funny because like I suggest that to guys that I sponsor, right? Like when they're having like a real hard emotional breakdown or there's something going on, I'm like, just write it down.
Mhm.
I'm always like, do a quick 1, 2, 3 on it. Like do like an unmanageability, like turning it over and then like letting it go. Like just write it down, see what happens. Sometimes I'll give them like a specific set of questions, like from the book or whatever, and then we'll be like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But like I don't do that with myself. Like what I do is I'll internalize it and I'll fire it off in my head a whole bunch of times, and then I'll call my sponsor and like a couple other men that like I trust a lot about like what's going on. Then I talk to them about the scenario and like what's going on in my head, and then we come to like an idea of like what's a good resolution to the way I'm feeling.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, the stuff I write down, I don't like to share. You know,
Yeah.
so that's why I write it down, right? Cause, and sometimes I do share, but you know, most of the time I don't share that shit that because it's not very healthy.
Yeah.
But it's a healthy way of dealing with it, right? What brought you back to the rooms?
Like an emotional break. Actually, a friend of mine who passed away last year, he called me up and he's like, "Hey man, I haven't seen you in a while." I was like, "Yeah, man, like this has been going on." And he's like, "Well, hey," he's like, "I'm going to this meeting tonight. You should come with me." And I was like, "Okay." And I went to a meeting and they asked me to share, and I fucking puked all over the meeting
Just
about.
held it hostage.
Yeah, well, I didn't hold it hostage. Like I respect the timers that
Yeah.
they have, but like the time that I was allowed to share, like I just like vomited, like what I'd been going through, where my head was at, like what I feel, all that stuff. And like as soon as I was able to do that, like there was like this feeling just washed over me of like of relief. I was like, fuck, I don't have to live like that anymore. Like I can just do this and then I'll be okay.
Have you stopped going back to meetings then since that day, or taking
Not
breaks?
not really. I have a couple times. Usually it's due to like work or like busyness in my life. I make up excuses where I can't attend lots of meetings, but after about 30 days of not going, I'm like I notice my behavior and my thinking start to change and I'm
Mhm.
like, holy fuck, I need to like figure this out. And then I jump back in and I start going. Like I just finished like from February till the like just 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I was on night shift at Suncor, and like I was not able to go to meetings for that entire time. I only had one day off, and that was a Sunday, and that's when I had my kids. And for a while, I was taking my kids to my home group. I did that for a couple of weeks, and then it got to the point where I was like, I'm tired. Like I don't want to drive there. My kids are good in meetings. They're quiet. They
Yeah,
understand the procedure. They've been to lots of them with me, so they understand like toy room or phone or just sit there quietly with dad.
but you know your limits of burning out and
Yeah,
where you need to rest, right?
yeah.
So
So I've set myself up now that I'm coming up on 8 years that I like to attend a minimum of 3 a week, right? So it's like my home group is on 2 nights a week, so I'll usually attend one of those, and then like one or two other ones that like I enjoy attending throughout the week. But I try not to do less than two. Like if I don't do three and I only do two, like I'm okay with that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a make or break, in your
Yeah.
recovery to, yeah, I get, like, for the longest time I was going to one meeting a week, my home group, right? And same as now, I'm back in a spot in my life where I have that one meeting a week that I'm 100% accountable to, unless there's something that I absolutely can't miss. But anything over top of that is just bonus meetings for me.
Hmm.
But I'm 100% accountable to that meeting. Service work, you do any service work?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
the
do.
value, what's the value of it too?
Um, I started doing service like right in my first year of recovery because like people would always say like service keeps you clean, which isn't always true. Service helps keep you clean and teaches you humility and fucking patience and all sorts of other shit that you don't expect. But for me, like my favorite type of service is one home group service because
Mhm.
like the meetings are the vehicle in which the message is carried to the still suffering, right? So it's very important to me to do service at my home group, but outside of that on like a subcommittee level, it's like a public relations. Like that's the stuff that I love that stuff. Like being able to go into detox centers or sometimes we'll go to like a nursing college or we'll go speak to kids at schools or we'll do recovery events, homeless connect or whatever it may be, right? Like that stuff like I love that shit, man.
That's
I love
awesome.
I love when industry professionals come up and they don't know about Narcotics Anonymous and they start asking questions. Then I can just be like, hey, 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 like this, and this, and
You get excited, eh? When you
yeah,
get to talk recovery or explain it or share it, you get excited. Like, I know I swear a lot when I get excited, like at meetings, but yeah, when I get to talk recovery, like I get uplifted, right? And because the gifts I've gotten and the life I have today is a result of getting clean and doing it through fellowship and learning how to live life like that. The program taught me how to get how to live a life, right? Or how to be a not a proper person, right? But be human, be okay with self, taught me all these things, how to be a normal person in the world, right? Or
hmm
quote unquote normal. What are some gifts of the recovery you've received? Unexpected gifts too.
humility. Um, I don't always have it, but the awareness that I need to practice it on a more regular basis. Like in my step work, um, that's like the one spiritual principle that comes up over and over again when I write about stuff. It's like practicing humility. So trying to remember that and like put it into action, like that's a gift that I have in my life today. And then the awareness of like some of my defects of character. I'm not aware of all of them because I have quite a few, but there's a select few that I remember from writing about it. And when I start acting on it, or people start saying to me like, "Hey, like you're acting this way," and then I can be like, "Oh, I get my back up right away and I get defensive, but that doesn't last as long as it once did. Now I can be like, oh, hey, you know what? Two people have said this to me, so there's a good chance."
Yeah.
So that's the greatest gift, and being able to be a present parent in my daughter and my stepdaughter's life, and having a really good patient co-parenting relationship with their mom.
Yeah. Are you with your mother? Like,
No, I am not.
yeah, I have a pretty good co-parent relationship with my ex too, and it took work. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
like once you get through that initial garbage and crap, and then realize put your differences aside and what the common.
Well, the first few years, like a lot of it was me, right? Like I had like an ego and like these expectations and like ideas of like how things should work, and took everything personally, and so it was always a fight. And now it's like, you know what, like let's just have a conversation. Like I don't like what's happening, or hey, I like what's happening. When she does things in her life that I think are good, like I'll support her, like job, school, whatever. I'm like, hey, I support you in that. Like if you need anything, let me know. It's a lot different than it was like 3 years ago when we split after our kid was born. Like it's and
Night and day. Yeah.
yeah, and like a large chunk of it was me. Like she has her own things, but like I don't like that's her,
Yeah.
right? And like she's allowed to be who she is, and I just try to be the best that I can.
Well, and at the end of the day, like I had to come to terms with I get no fucking say. Like I say that loosely, right? But like black and white, like she can do whatever she wants. Like I honestly, she can do whatever she can wants to, and that, and I can, and I. But it's for the best that we work together.
Yeah,
But yeah, at the end of the day, I really do have no say what she does with them or how she does it with them, and it is what it is. And I'm not saying anything bad,
yeah.
just black and white, right? What does the word honesty look like to you?
Honesty. Like I like to go back to emotional stuff. So like emotional honesty. So if I'm feeling a certain way, like expressing how I feel, like setting a boundary with myself, and then if that boundary gets crossed because of whatever, like expressing how I feel about it. Not expecting the person to respect or understand, but just knowing that, hey, like I'm feeling this way because of something that's happening, like whatever, right?
Yeah,
That's important to me today with honesty.
cool. I like to ask this question to all my guests: Is do you have any mentors or role models, and what area of your life?
I don't know. I really don't know if I have any mentors or role models. Um, like I don't. No, I don't think so. Maybe some of the men who've been around in my fellowship for like decades and stayed clean. I think that's something that I want to strive to be like. Like my sponsor, he has like a really good working relationship with his wife, and they met in the program, and like I aspire to have like that type of relationship with someone someday. So like I look to him for guidance and advice on that.
Cool, cool. What do you do for fun and recovery today?
Oh, I go to concerts, I go to drum and bass shows, I go to campouts, I go to dances, I go for coffee. Sometimes I just sit at home and watch TV for hours on end. When I first came in, people have this saying like, if you hang out at a barber shop long enough, you're gonna get a haircut.
Yeah.
Like I don't prescribe to that idea, right? So I would go to like bars to watch live music, but when I would go, it would be me and like 6 or 7 other people who are in recovery, right? Because at the time I was very fragile and anxiety. I thought I'd drink if I was anxious because that's what I did before. But as time has progressed, I can go to concerts by myself and enjoy the music and just be there enjoying it and leave when it's time to leave, you know. Now I'm okay with expressing my limit. Like if I go to a drum and bass show and like I'm tired of people getting drunk and high around me and I'm all danced out, it's like, you know what? I'm gonna go. It's like, why are you leaving? It's like, no, because I feel like it,
Yep.
you know, and not feeling ashamed or embarrassed or uncomfortable that I've reached my limit. I've set a boundary, and now it's time for me to go. Right? I don't want to hide and
I
like
agree.
be unafraid to do stuff. Like I'm gonna go see Rage in March by myself.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm kind of jealous, actually.
Yeah. As soon as the tickets went on sale, I seen online and I said to myself, if they ever tour, I'm going to see them, you know? And like they're touring. I was like, I don't need to go with anybody. I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to go see them.
Yeah, I go to shows. I'm a metalhead, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough to find people with the same taste in music that I do.
Yeah.
And I've gone to a few shows on my own, and the only time and in that situation, or when other people talk about it, I always ask, what are your motives? Right? Like my motives are see the fucking show, be part of the show. I like getting in the pit. I like crowd surfing. And once if my focus ever changed on that, then yeah, I'm being honest with myself, it's time to go, right? When I go to a show today, the only time I ever feel uncomfortable is when it's in between sets, and everybody's standing around. And I'm not a very social guy, right? I'm just standing there, kind of just looking around, like don't know what the fuck to do with myself, right?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
only time I'm awkward, right? But yeah, if you ever want to go to a show, I'll go to a show with you.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
like shows. Yeah. Just me and my buddy just went and seen Slipknot when they were in town. Yeah. I've been waiting to see them since they fucking debuted in 1999.
Really, I went in 2015 with them here, but I couldn't justify spending the money on the tickets, and I couldn't sit at that show. Like I couldn't afford the floor seats.
Yeah. They were expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
But I can't go to a metal show and sit. I couldn't go see Slipknot and sit there and watch the show. Like
Yeah.
it would make me go fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like I got to jump around, I got to bounce around, and I got to go. Like me, it's therapeutic for me getting in the mosh pit and banging people around and getting banged around, and yeah, that's therapy for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what do I want to ask you to now? I have a cheat sheet that I don't even know what I was gonna do. Any life mottos or anything like that? Sayings?
Yeah. Time is your friend. My first sponsor used to say that to me because I used to want to do everything right now, like all the service, like all the girls, all of this, all of that. And he's like, man, he's like, time is your fucking friend, man. You got lots of time. Just slow down. I tell that to everyone when they're all panicked about stuff. That's something that I keep with me.
Well, it's expectation or self expectation, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of expectations lead to resentments, right? Um, that's it. I don't even know what I was gonna say actually. What time is it? I don't even know. I got the wrong thing up. Let's just see how far in we are here. Anything you want to add or?
um, I don't know. If you're listening and you're new or you're coming back or you're struggling, just know that you never have to use again if you choose, because using is a choice, and hopefully you choose not to use.
Stay away from that first one, no
Yeah,
matter what.
yeah.
Reach out. Yeah, what's a suggestion you give to a newcomer just coming in then? What's a key component to first getting sober?
I don't really know. There's so much because it's like there's a lot of stuff that we tell people in meetings that they should do, like get numbers, go to meetings, and blah 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 blah. But for me, it's find a place where you don't feel overly uncomfortable. So like if you find a meeting, and it could be a big meeting, a small meeting, whatever the format is, and you don't feel like that crazy anxiety, like just go to that meeting all the time and just learn the people's names at that meeting. And like just start there, cuz you'll get comfortable and people will get to know who you are and you'll get to know who they are. So when you're struggling and they see the change in your face or your attitude, there's a really good chance that they'll talk to you about it. And when you're feeling that strain and that struggle, there's a really good chance that you might talk to them.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, yeah, totally. I also like to tell people stay out of your head. you know,
That's a fucking hard one, man. Like,
it
like
is.
fucking telling someone new, like you stay out of your head, and they're like, "But I've been in there for fucking 30 years," you know, like
Yeah, that's true.
that's a hard one, man. Distraction though, like distraction can be good. Like it's good in the beginning, but like once you've been around for a while, if you try to distract yourself from the way you're feeling, then it's just you're just pushing the problem away.
Yeah,
Like I've found anyway for
yeah,
myself.
yeah. What's the therapeutic value of one addict helping another? I don't know.
Unity and freedom, right?
Yeah,
What I can't do alone, we can do together. So for me, I get a lot out of helping people who are new or who have been around for a while or whatever the case may be. Like just recently my cousin reached out to me, and like I've known that he's had a problem for a while cuz my mom had mentioned it to me, and like sort of suggested that I like reach out to him, and I was like that's not the way that this works. I was like he has to
mm,
want it, and he has to reach out to me, and when he was ready, he knew that like I was clean, and so he reached out to me, and like it felt really good to talk to him about some stuff and offer him some advice and give him some literature, but also to know that not to have expectations, because I have this kid that I call my brother. I've basically known him since he was 11, and I've been trying to help him get clean for like the past 8 years, and it took me up until this last time he got out of the pen for me to stop helping him, because every time he'd get out, I'd give him some money or a place to stay, and I'd try to get him on his feet, get him going to meetings. But like he was just like me, right? He knew the street life, drugs and gangs and all that, and it felt comfortable and it felt easy because it was something that we had done for so long. So he would just go back to it, and just this time. I paid for him to get into a recovery house, and he left after 2 days, and I was like, "You owe me $700." And he's like, "I don't have the money." I was like, "You showed me the text of what you were getting from Buddy." I was like, "You have the money." And then he called me a week later and said he was in jail, and I was like, "Nothing I can do for you, man." I was like, "Call me when you're ready to stop
yeah,
and you're in treatment." And then he hasn't called me since. So, I had to learn to cut him off. And I tell people to do that all the time, right? Sponsees or friends in the program, I'm like, "Oh, that person's toxic. You got to stop doing that." But like I can't do it for myself. So I was just like,
that's
you know
right.
what, fuck it, man, I got to do it. Like it's over.
Yeah. Um, uh, with the time you got today, do you think relapse is planned?
I think I want to say yes and no. Um, I've seen instances where people don't technically plan their relapse, but they have like this idea of like if things are happen in this certain progression, then like I'm gonna use. But I've also seen people just fucking use,
Mhm.
and like and it's like why the fuck did you choose to do that? And it's like I don't really know. Like there was emotional turmoil in my life, and my wife left me or whatever, and then all of a sudden like I knew what to do and the emotions were there, but instead of calling someone I just picked up. So I think it can be both ways.
Yeah, my relapse was planned. 2 years in the making, a resentment that turned into a reservation.
Hmm.
And it took me 2 years to go back out before it actually got a hold of me. I'm gonna finish up with this one. How would you describe your life today after getting clean? You know
Man,
what, or what's inspiring today? You know what? Actually, how about this one? I keep asking. I'm all over the place, right? What are you passionate about today?
passionate, like narcotics, or I don't want to say the name, so you can edit that out.
We already dropped it. I heard it,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I know. Yeah,
we're
I
not.
was I was gonna ask you to edit out anyway, but yeah, like the fellowship that I'm a part of, and like and showing people that you can stay clean, man. and being a parent. Like I had no parenting skills when I had my daughter, and I didn't have parenting skills when I was with her mom for 2 years previous with my stepdaughter, right? And that's what I'm learning today, is to be like a present parent, and like getting compliments for being a present parent. Like that's a huge accomplishment for me, because when I was using, like, couldn't even take care of myself, man. Like I wouldn't shower, I wouldn't eat, none of that shit. And now, like, I got kids that I feed and I bathe and I clothe, and I take them to do stuff, and I make sure that they, learn how to read and learn how to count and all that stuff.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It feels great, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. When my daughter was born, I fucking cried, man, like a little fucking baby, man. As soon as she was put in my arms, I just started bawling, man. It was the greatest feeling in the world.
I get choked up when I like scroll back like old pictures, right? Like I feel myself get a little bit like teary eyed,
Yeah.
right? Looking at how they've grown up or over the years, and just I
Yeah.
get a little bit choked up. And time flies by so quick, right? Like it happens so fast.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Um, I think that's pretty much it that I got for questions. What do you want to leave with the listeners?
I don't know. You'll hear a lot of people say, like, if I can do it, you can do it. I don't know, man. Like, I don't, not everyone can do it. Like, I've seen people try, and then whatever it is, it just takes them out, and they just don't want to surrender. So, like, at least give it a shot. Recovery is possible from anything, man. I was a junkie who lived on the streets and lived in jail for basically my entire young adult life, and I found the desire, and hopefully you do too.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to share your story with us, Tyson.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And for everybody else out there, for everybody else listening, I can't even fucking talk today. For everybody else listening, it means the world that you shared your time with us today. I'll leave you the same way I leave you every episode, and that's make lots of memories, take lots of pics, and show the world your smile. Cheers.
Have a good night.